Hey guys, the Bayverse here. It's just me and look, I posted on a community poll asking my subscribers which one of these videos would they like to watch, and of course, the one that's the longest, every single movie Transformers character explain. I vastly underestimated how long this is gonna be. When I mean every single character, I mean every single character. From comics, to toys, to movies, to weird Japanese media, the live action movies have no shortage of characters that you never even heard about. I swear, some of these even surprise me they exist. So this is probably gonna be a 10-part video, which I'm ultimately probably gonna compile them to one large 1 hour long video at some point. In this video, I'm just gonna go over the 2007 Autobots. I'm gonna be explaining where they're from, what they did, and if they're alive or not. Very similar to the way I did my all characters that are alive at the point of the last 9 type of videos. Which, I made a lot of those, and I still haven't finished the Transformers Prime one, so yeah, I'm gonna have to pick that up someday. But not today. Today, I'm gonna be going over 500 characters that are part of the movies. I'm laughing because it hurts. Now that's, no problem. I made plenty of long videos before, but this is the second time I'm recording this because in my first recording, this got corrupted. So if this gets corrupted again, I swear I'm gonna cry. So, yeah. Deep breaths, fire. Deep breaths, fire. Let's begin. The first character that has the honor to appear here is the 1960s muscle car. Yes, this is the only image we have of him because he doesn't transform into anything because he's part of this children's book little game where Optimus Prime sends a bunch of Autobots to Sam's high school to quote-unquote protect him, spy on him, to make sure that the evil Decepticons don't try and harm him. And basically every single car that you see around the school is a Transformer. Even the school bus. Ugh. Supposedly, much like everyone that's gonna be part of Sam's high school's little thing is alive, they never die. So pretty sure that's gonna make some of you happy, although none of these guys have actual names, so don't get too attached. Next up we got Aggro Racer, who was one of the primary Autobots that appear in the game Allspark Wars. Aggro Racer basically joins the Autobots during the time of 2007, where he fought against the Decepticons and his evil nemesis, Agoraptor. I see what they did there. They kept the first part of the name and changed the latter. Wow, so creative, Hasbro. Now, what's interesting about this is that this guy is basically from an alternate timeline where Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, and Ratchet end up dying at some point during the war against the Decepticons. However, Aggro Racer manages to collect enough Allspark shards to revive them, and together with their help, they manage to force the Decepticons to leave the planet. Although Agoraptor, Aggro Racer's nemesis, promised that he will return someday. Next up we got Air Raid. Now what's interesting about Air Raid is that Air Raid is technically 2 characters. There's 2 Air Raids in the live action movie universe. The first one appears on the IDW comics where he's actually part of RC's team that were on a mission on Mars to take out Starscream and his remaining Decepticons after the events of 2007. He gives the Autobots aerial support but unfortunately gets shot down out of the sky and eventually he's killed off by Starscream as Smokescreen was trying to evacuate him to a safer place. The second Air Raid appears in the Transformers Dark of the Moon, the game, which roughly ties into the events of Dark of the Moon. In this one, he's in command of the aerial bots and fights Starscream to protect the MechTech shipment. Unfortunately, all 3 of the aerial bots get shot down by Starscream and supposedly died since they never appear in Dark of the Moon. A great character that was really wasted. Next up is the most disturbing character in the movies, and that's RC. Not saying that she by herself is disturbing, I'm saying the stuff that happens to her is disturbing. Her story is so long that she's gonna get her own video someday, trust me on that. To cut a long story short, she's the younger sister of Leader 1 and Chromia. At some point during the war she was drafted to participate even though she was very young. Her sisters get killed one by one in the war until she's the only one left. Eventually she gets mutilated by Thundercracker and experimented on by a Decepticon scientist into a new smaller body. Her spark is used to revive her sisters, and her mind is turned into some kind of hive mind alongside them in order to create a new breed of Decepticon super soldiers. This of course backfires, the sisters break free, they reunite with Optimus on Earth, where they're still forced to fight against the Decepticons once again, and one by one, RC's sisters get killed once again, until she eventually herself gets killed. It's a very tragic story, and I'm not gonna be able to do it justice in this short video, but RC, you deserved better. Next up we got Arctos. What's interesting about Arctos is that in the title movie comics, he's actually the Autobot who sends the Allspark off planet during the final days of the war. Supposedly this guy's still alive, but we don't even know if he makes it to Earth. Next up we got Armorhide. Armorhide was one of the Autobots leading the resistance back on Cybertron against the Decepticons, and he does participate on RC's raid against the Decepticon capital back on Cybertron. After a successful raid, him and his Autobots make their way back to Earth, where unfortunately he was captured by the human terrorist group called the Initiative, where he was brainwashed and forced to kill his fellow Autobots in combat, until he was rescued by Ness, but unfortunately the brainwashing had done almost irreversible damage to poor Armorhide's brain, so he was forced to leave active duty as he recovered. Unfortunately for him, he was later killed by Shockwave while he was in a very defenseless state, but at the time of Dark of the Moon, a grave was made for him. Next up we got Avalanche. Avalanche is part of the Chevy Autobots, and by just hearing the name, you probably figure out what this guy's all about. This is a promotional Transformer that's just there to basically promote the Chevy product. He appears on the Transformers Rush the Chevy Autobots, their game, and he's certainly not gonna be the last that we see of these promotional characters. Fun fact, he's actually a triple changer who goes from a regular car to an SUV pickup. Wow, so much of a difference! Next up we got Avio, who transforms into, you guessed it, a Trevlet Avio. Not much is known about this guy except there are plenty like him. He's basically the Autobot equivalent of Decepticon drones. Next up we got Backtrap. Now what's very interesting about this guy is that he's one of those confirmed Autobots that does survive all the way to Age of Extinction. Somehow he manages to survive all the way from 2007 to Age of Extinction, where he answers Optimus Prime's call for the Autobots to reunite. Fortunately for him, he managed to reunite with Optimus and his fellow Autobots, as well as a few extras which we might cover later in this video series. Next up we got Autobot Big Daddy. This guy honestly doesn't do much, and to be honest, he really is kind of a jerk. During the IDW comics, he was part of a crowd of Autobot and Decepticon civilians that were basically witnessing Starscream execute publicly a little one and a bunch of other Autobots, and he kinda did nothing about it. So yeah, he could have done something, but instead he decided to mind his own business and not do anything. Nice going, man. Next up is Breakaway. And see, I said it right this time. People gave me so much slack for mispronouncing it in the past. Like, come on, some of you guys are very mean. Breakaway was part of RC's raid team back on Cybertron when they assaulted the Decepticon capital. After the capital was destroyed, him along with RC boarded the ship and made their way to Earth. However, their ship was attacked by the Decepticon known as Thundercracker, and after RC gets knocked out, we don't know if Breakaway managed to survive that encounter with the Decepticon. Current whereabouts are unknown. Next up we got Bumblebee, and honestly this guy needs no introduction. He's basically the Pikachu of the franchise and is probably the one character that will most likely never really die, cause his toys just keep on selling. Next up we got Bumper. Bumper is an Autobot trainee who was part of Ironhide's Strike Force back on Cybertron. He's the youngest member of Ironhide's Strike Force and its newest member. He's still determined to prove himself to his new mentor. He appears in the telemovie comics and that's about it. Next up we got Camshaft. Camshaft was part of RC's raid team back on Mars when they were trying to finish up Starscream after the events of 2007. Unfortunately for him, he was killed really quickly when Thundercracker showed up on the battlefield and the Decepticon basically cut him in half with one swing of his weapon. Next up we got Cementrock. Cementrock was one of the Autobots that were hiding in Sam's high school. And after that we got Cherry Picker, who's also one of the many Autobots that were hiding on Sam's high school. Optimus, I think this is way too overkill for what's essentially one human insect. Next up we got Circuit. Now Circuit is basically the Autobot equivalent of Lockdown. Much like Lockdown, he also doesn't really care much about the Autobots and Decepticons. Even the Autobots don't trust him and don't like him, which makes you wonder why the Autobots keep this guy around. Basically this is the one guy both Autobots and Decepticons unanimously agree that they don't trust and don't like. So good job Circuit, you managed to get two factions that will never work together to actually agree on something. Next up we got Classic 1950s Car, which again is one of the many Autobots that's part of the undercover operation to keep Sam safe in his high school. Next up we got Cliff Jumper. No, that Cliff Jumper. This Cliff Jumper. This Cliff Jumper was part of RC's raid team back on Cybertron, and he was probably the best fighter that the Autobots have at their disposal during that fight. He killed tons, and I mean tons, of Decepticons all by himself, and managed to go toe to toe with Thundercracker for a short while before being held by RC. Unfortunately, he was heavily damaged during the fight by Starscream, and as the fight started to go sideways, RC tried to evacuate Cliff Jumper to a safer location, but she was knocked down by Starscream really quickly. We don't know if Cliff Jumper survived his ordeal. He was heavily injured, but a little while later when Soundwave showed up on the battlefield, his corpse was never found, meaning that he could have probably gotten away. The toys seem to indicate that he does make it to Earth, but that's still sort of in unknown canon territory. Next up we have Cloaker. Cloaker was a champion racer back on Cybertron before the war. After the war, he joined Optimus Prime and his Autobots to fight against the tyranny of the Decepticons. He was one of the many Autobots that were part of RC's raid team back on Cybertron, and after successfully destroying the Decepticon capital, he joined RC on her voyage back to Earth, where their ship was attacked by Thundercracker, and after RC was knocked down, he was never seen again. Next up we got Cobalt, and he transformed into, you guessed it, a Chevrolet Cobalt. Who's shocked, honestly. These Autobots are well known for their amazing speed, and shockingly looks kinda similar to Transformers Prime Bumblebee. Huh. Next up we got Cosmos. Now this is one that I know a lot of you guys don't know about, but Cosmos actually does appear in the Michael Bay universe. In the IDW comics, he's basically transforms into a UFO and gives logistical support to RC and her team as they're heading to raid Starscream's fortress on Mars. We don't know what happens to him, and we don't even know if he makes it to Earth. His current whereabouts are unknown. Next up we got another character that's gonna get his own video at some point, believe me, and that's Create-A-Bot, or also known as Kid, the Young One, and whatever the slack you want to call him. He's an Autobot soldier that appears on the Transformers Nintendo DS The Game, where it retells an alternate version of the 2007 storyline, which it's really good. I played a couple times, I actually have fun playing it. The best way I can describe the game is, think of the 2007 movie, but without the humans, and it's just more Autobot center. The kid goes through the game trying to prove himself to Optimus Prime before accidentally getting Bumblebee captured. After freeing him, he starts learning what being a true Autobot means and gives his life to destroy the Allspark and keep it away from Megatron towards the end of the game, ultimately dying a hero's death. Next up we got Crossers. No, not that Crossers, this Crossers. Crossers was part of the Autobot resistance back on Cybertron, where he helped RC destroy the Decepticon capital. After that, he made his way back to Earth, supposedly. That's what some of the toys indicate, but this, is just something that we are just not entirely sure about. Next up we got Dino, or Mirage, who was part of Optimus Prime's crew during the time of Dark of the Moon. After the Battle of Chicago, he supposedly gets hunted down by Cemetery Wind, although if you take a look at the Cemetery Wind cards, you can see that he's never listed as deceased, meaning that there's a chance that he actually did survive, but whether we'll see him again or not remains to be seen. Dump Truck is one of the many Autobots that's hiding in Sam's high school, and that's all you get from me about him. And Leader 1 is the kinda love interest of Optimus Prime in a weird way. Their relationship in the Bayverse is not that well explored, although they both do seem to care about each other. Her story is also really long, but she's basically one of the Autobots that gets left behind to lead the resistance back on Cybertron, and at some point gets captured by Starscream and gets killed by him. She's later revived by the Decepticon Flatline when he experiments on RC. After escaping, she participates in quite a few battles alongside Ness and the Autobots against the Decepticons, but she's ultimately killed by Shockwave when the latter basically flies up to the stratosphere and descends like a meteor on top of her, just to kill her quickly and piss off Optimus Prime, which does end up backfiring on Shockwave, because Optimus Prime basically almost murders Shockwave in the comic, and in the movies Optimus Prime has a personal vendetta against Shockwave, who he has labeled as a monster and a killer. Next up we got Equinox, who transforms into a Chevrolet Equinox. These names are so creative. It's one of the many, and I mean many, Chevy Autobot drones. Next up we got Evac, who I can only describe as Autobot Blackout. Ebed was one of the many Autobots who sided with Optimus Prime back on Cybertron and rejected the Decepticon way. In the Telemovie comics, he actually does make it to Earth and helps the Autobots in many battles. Next up we got Farsight T-20, who's part of the Real Gear Robots. The Real Gear Robots were this line of Transformers who transform into like appliances that humans use. Farsight here transforms into a pair of binoculars that humans use to spy on the Decepticons and so on. Fire Truck is a fire truck. No who's part of the many Autobots that's hiding in Sam's high school. Next up we got Flash. No, I'm not serious, this guy's name is Flash, who's a Chevy Autobot, transforming into a red kobold. Now typically I would just move on, but there's something interesting about him. He's also one of those Autobots that's confirmed to be alive by the time of Age of Extinction. Yes, that's crazy! Flash went on the run much like the other Autobots by the time of Age of Extinction, and he was chased by the NYPD at Grand Central Station. He managed to evade them and avoid capture. Supposedly he's still alive out there. Next up we got Garbage Truck, who's a garbage truck and is part of Sam's high school's cover-up team. Seriously Hasbro, couldn't you be bothered to give these guys names? Next up we got Grindcore, who's one of the Autobots that sided with Optimus Prime pretty early on in the war. Unfortunately, he was captured by Starscream and his life force was used to power up a fake Allspark cube that Starscream hoped could be used to replace the one that was destroyed back in the Battle of Mission City. Of course, this didn't work and Grindcore died for nothing. Next up we got Grocery Getter, who was one of the many Autobots who were part of Optimus Prime totally not weird operation of sending over 20 Transformers to monitor one human child. Hacker X3 is part of the Real Gear Robots and he transforms into a non-functional handheld video game system that apparently plays Transformers the game. Neat. Hacker X9 is a Syntoid Protector, which is a G1 reference for those of you who don't know. Not much is known about this guy and we don't have an image of him, but what we do know is that he can take a peek into other universes and see what they're all about. He's basically more of a scientist. Next up we got HHR, who transforms into, you guessed it, a Chevrolet HHR. Big surprise there. He's not the strongest of Autobot drones out there, but he has brains to compensate for it. Without a doubt, the Autobot drone that has the biggest amount of processing power. Next up we got High Score 100, who transforms into a wireless Xbox 360 controller. Honestly, I love this guy and I would like to have this toy just because of how goofy it is, but unfortunately we don't know much about him. All that we know is that he's an expert on martial arts skills and hand-to-hand combat techniques. What's he gonna do? Is he gonna drop kick the Decepticons or something? Pfft, not with that size. Highlight 1070 is one of the Real Gear Robots, who transforms into a cellular phone with a flip-up screen/button cover. Man, those things make me feel old. I barely remember those things. This Autobot is more of a trickster who likes to set traps for the Decepticons rather than spy on them. He has made one appearance in the IDW comics. Well, it could be an Easter egg, but William Lennox and Robert Epps appear to own cell phones that are the same model and color as Highline 1070. Could Optimus Prime have sent this guy to spy on them? Probably. I mean, he sent 20 Autobots to spy on one human. I wouldn't be surprised if he sent all of the Real Gear Robots to spy on these two. That guy does not care for privacy, let me tell you that. Next up we got Hoist. Now there's two interesting bits about Hoist. A, in the Transformers the game for the PSP, which is a retelling of the 2007 storyline, he's one of the many Autobots that lands alongside Optimus Prime and helps them on their fight against the Decepticons on Mission City. Last thing we saw him, he was escaping Hoover Dam alongside all of the captive Autobots once the Decepticons started attacking the place. And his other appearance is in the Telemovie comics, and that's weird because Sideswipe and Ironhide are basically trying to kill Hoist because he's a Decepticon? Okay, I'll just accept it and move on. Next up we got Hound, who's one of the characters that appears in Transformers Age of Extinction, and you all know his story. He also makes an appearance in the PSP for Transformers the game, where unfortunately he does end up dying at the hands of the Decepticons. Hound fought against the Decepticons in that game, and through some shenanigans involving a computer virus, he gave his life to give the Autobots a fighting chance. He later died in his best friend Trailbreaker's arms, which was actually kinda sad. Of course, that's the 2007 version. The Age of Extinction version's all well and good, he's still alive, and he's now back on Cybertron helping Optimus Prime fix the planet. Next up we got Impala, who transforms into, you guessed it, a Chevrolet Impala. Funnily enough, this guy is actually like ninja inspired. So that's pretty neat actually. Him and Drift will get along. Next up we got Inferno. Inferno was one of the many Autobots who joined with Optimus Prime during the early days of the war and was part of the Autobot strike force that was trying to protect the Allspark as it was being launched off Cybertron. He got into a fight with some Dreadwing drones, and unfortunately for him, the building they were on collapsed, leaving his ultimate fate unknown. Next up we got Ironhide, and this guy needs no introduction. One of Optimus Prime's oldest friends, who later became the second in command of the Autobots after the unfortunate death of Jazz. Ironhide is probably the one Autobot besides Optimus Prime and Bumblebee who has the highest amount of confirmed Decepticon kill counts. Pretty sure I made a video about it. If you wanna go check it out, you know what to do. Unfortunately for Ironhide, he met his end in Dark of the Moon when the son of a glitch, Sentinel Prime, shot him in the back with Cosmic Rust, forcing him to dissolve and die a slow and painful death. You deserve better, Ironhide. You deserve better. Next up we got Jazz. Now while Jazz died in the first movie when Megatron wanted 2 pieces of him, in some alternate reality comics like the Tana movie comics and so on, Jazz actually gets revived and fights alongside the Autobots once again to fight the Decepticons. However, canonically he does end up dying, and the IDW comics, which are the thing that ties into the movies the most, do confirm that Jazz was buried at sea. Next we got Jetfire. Now Jetfire has a long backstory, but he was part of the Fallen Seekers that found planets that could be, you know, destroyed to gain energon for their race. And ultimately he ended up betraying the Fallen and helped Sam with Wiki find the Matrix leadership to revive Optimus Prime and stop the Fallen. He gave his life to Optimus Prime so that he could get the ability to fly and fight the Fallen. After the Battle of Egypt, Ness will reverse engineer the flight technology that he gave Optimus Prime to build the latter, an even better and more powerful jetpack that he will later use to fight against the Decepticons by the time of Dark of the Moon. Next up we got Cub. We don't have an official image of him, but what we do know is that back on Cybertron, he led a rescue mission on a Decepticon prison to rescue RC from Decepticon captivity. Next up we got Landmine, who was given life by the Allspark during the time of 2007, after the Battle of Mission City. He went on to help the Autobots in a few occasions, and at some other point, one of the Allspark fragments also gave life to other 3 landmine drones, who go by the monochrome LM1. The drones rose up to defend the humans that were currently being attacked by the Decepticon known as Wreckage. Unfortunately, all of these 3 components were destroyed. Supposedly only 1 remains, and even survives all the way to the events of Age of Extinction, if the Transformers Rise of the Darkspark the game is anything to go by. Next up we got Longarm, who's probably the first minicon ever that's part of the Bayverse. He transforms into a very tiny hook crane truck, and that's literally all we know about him. Next up we got the second Longarm. Yes, I know some of these names repeat, the Bayverse is very confusing. Who, much like Landmine, was given life by the Allspark during the Battle of Mission City. Although he didn't develop sentience right away, eventually he did and served alongside the Autobots and Ness. By the time of Dark of the Moon, he was unfortunately killed by Shockwave once he was rescuing some humans that were trapped in a burning power plant. Next up we got Longview, who's a real gear robot. He transforms into a pair of binoculars, and in the comics he was rescued by Ironhide's strike force back on Cybertron. Next up we got Minivan. He transforms into a minivan that may or may not have candy inside, for all the nice children that hang around Sam's high school. Jeez, that got really dark. Next up we got Nightbeat 7, who's another real gear robot who transforms into an MP3 player. He honestly doesn't do much and just hangs around Cybertron in a bar alongside other Transformers, instead of, I don't know, taking an active role in fighting against the Decepticons. There's like 100 other things that this guy could be doing. He just transform and play music for people. Next up we got Optimus Prime. This guy needs no introduction. Murder Prime, Nemesis Prime, leader of the Autobots, bringer of death. Probably the Autobot with the biggest kill count in the Bayverse without a doubt. Last we know him, he joined his fellow Autobots and returned back to Cybertron in order to try and fix the planet. Next up we got the police motorbike, who's partnered with a cop who likes to give high school students parking tickets. What a jerk. He's one of the many Autobots who's part of the Misfit crew watching over Sam. Next up we got Prowl. Prowl does make a couple of appearances in the IDW comics, and he looks fairly G1 accurate actually. He's primarily a background character that helps Optimus Prime and the Autobots organize their resistance against the Decepticons. He honestly doesn't do much, and that's kind of unfortunate. Supposedly he does make it to Earth by the time of Age of Extinction, since he does have a toy that shows him being part of the Autobots by this point. Next up we got Ratchet, one of Optimus Prime's oldest friends and the team medic of the Autobots back on Earth. He served alongside the Autobots for 4 movies before being unfortunately hunted down by Cemetery Wind, killed by Lockdown, and have his remains basically be melted to build more KSI drones. Fortunately, his death was later avenged by Optimus Prime once they killed Lockdown and his human partner, Harold Attinger. Next up we got Reg, who was one of the first Autobot scouts sent to Earth to monitor the place and look for the Allspark. He unfortunately got jumped by a bunch of Decepticons, and when the other Autobot scouts went to his location, they only found the Decepticons there, meaning that he probably got killed by them. I can see the light, we're almost done with 2007. Next up we got Salvage, who was given life by the Allspark during the Battle of Mission City. While he didn't gain sentience right away, he did over time and eventually joined Ness and the Autobots. Unfortunately, he was killed by Shockwave prior to the events of Dark of the Moon, after saving a couple of humans from a broken power plant. Next up we got School Bus, who's a very creepy Autobot who likes to invite kids inside of him and spy on them closely. Ugh. Hasbro WTF. Next up we got Sideswipe. This guy needs no introduction. A fan favorite character that almost everybody likes. He's so liked that people keep begging poor YouTubers like myself to make more theories and explanations as to how this guy could still be alive by the time of Age of Extinction, even though it is very clear that Hasbro has no plans to use him in the future, and the extra promotional material for Age of Extinction clearly states that he was killed by Cemetery Wind and the Autobots mourn his death. Signet Flare was one of the many Autobots who was captured by Starscream back on Cybertron, and his life force was used to power up the fake Allspark cube. He basically died for nothing. Next up we got Silverado, who transforms into a Chevrolet Silverado. Amazing naming conventions, Hasbro. He's one of those Autobots who prefers to get up close and personal instead of relying on guns. Next up we got Skids. Now that Skids, this Skids. This Skids, we honestly don't know much about him, and all that we have is this 3D battle card game look for him. Apparently he used to spar with Camshaft back on Cybertron, and was commonly regarded to be one of the weakest Autobots when it came to a one-on-one fist fight. Current whereabouts are unknown. Next up we got Skyblast. Skyblast was part of RC's team back on Cybertron when they were raiding the Decepticon capital. He faced off against a Decepticon dive bomb, and before he was about to die, he was rescued by Starscream because, funny story, just as the Autobots were about to raid the Decepticon capital, Starscream, the current leader of the Decepticons, actually faced a revolt by the part of Dreadwing, who took control of most of the Decepticon drones and wanted to rebel against Starscream. So the Autobots were fighting a 3-way fight. It was Starscream's loyalists against Dreadwing's rebellion and the Autobot resistance. So the only reason why Starscream saved this guy is because he just hated the traitors more. Next up we got Skydive. Skydive is an Autobot that transforms into an F-22 Raptor. He appears in the Transformers the game for the Nintendo DS. And while he doesn't really have any story relevance, the Create-A-Bot character can actually transform into this guy. His current whereabouts are unknown, but supposedly he's still alive. At least in that timeline. Next up is Slipstream, who's not a female and looks like this. Ugh. Slipstream was part of Ironhide's strike force back on Cybertron, where they raided a Decepticon prison camp and rescued a bunch of Autobots. Smokescream is an Autobot that kinda looks like Jazz but with different colors. He was part of RC's raid team on Mars where he was shot down by RC, but miraculously survived and made his way back to Earth. Unfortunately, he didn't get as lucky. He was captured by the human terrorist group known as the Initiative, where he was brainwashed. Before his brainwashing was undone, he managed to regain his sanity. Unfortunately for him, he suffered mental damage and he had to stave off active duty, where once again he got unlucky and was killed by Shockwave once he arrived in the Autobot base. Man, this guy can't catch a break. Speed Dial 800 is one of the real gear robots who transforms into another flip phone. He's appearing rivals with the Decepticon known as Booster X-10, and he's also one of the many Autobots that are basically going around spying on humans, making sure that none of them are collaborating with Decepticons or making sure that Decepticons are not targeting them. Next up we got Spinks, who's one of the Chevy Autobots, and he landed alongside Bumblebee on Earth during the event of 2007. He was ambushed by a couple of Decepticons alongside Bumblebee, but both Autobots managed to fight them off. Current whereabouts? Unknown. Spy Shot 6 is a real gear robot who transforms into a camera. Man, those look old. He spies on the Decepticons and often takes pictures of them. He's a true spy master who so far hasn't gotten caught by the Decepticons and managed to spy on them freely with little problems. Street Sweeper is one of the many Autobots that are hiding in Sam's high school. Strongarm is one of the strongest Autobots that got left behind on Cybertron. He serves mostly as the group's mechanic and weapons expert. He's also one of the group's strongest fighters. He was part of RC's raid team back on Cybertron against the Decepticon capital, and after destroying the capital, he supposedly made his way back to Earth. SUV is an SUV who hides alongside the many Autobots in Sam's high school. Optimus, why he had to send so many? This list is so long. I'm losing my sanity as I'm doing this. Next up we got Swerve, who's one of the very few Autobots who we actually have a CGI model for. He's basically a red Sideswipe, except that he comes with, and I quote, rocket fire and has sharpshooting scales. Yes, that's how they literally describe it in the packaging. He looks kinda cool and has a unique looking faceplate, so that's pretty neat. Oh god, we're about to finish this section. It's about time. I'm losing my mind here. Next up we got Trailbreaker. Trailbreaker appears in the Transformers the game for the PSP, where he's best friends with Hound. Unfortunately, Hound ends up dying and Trailbreaker basically fought alongside Hound till the end, where Hound ended up dying in Trailbreaker's arms. Supposedly he survived the game, though it's a bit unclear. Next up we got Ultra Magnus. Yes, I was shocked by this one. Ultra Magnus actually does exist in the Bayverse. In the Telemovie comics, Starscream speaks of Ultra Magnus, and that's about it. Yep, no images, no descriptions besides that. That's about it. Next up we got Warpath. Now there's two versions of Warpath. The first one is one of the many Autobots that gets captured on Cybertron by Starscream, and his life force is used to power up the fake Allspark cube, where it fails and he dies for nothing. The other version appears in Dark of the Moon the game, where he's actually part of Nest and participates in the raid on the Decepticons hideout before the events of Dark of the Moon. He fights against Megatron but gets promptly defeated by him. We don't know if Warpath dies or if he survives. It's very unclear, but in the game when a character dies they turn into like black smoke. For Warpath he just falls, all damage and stuff, and that's about it. So he could have survived, I think. Next up we got Wheeljack, or also known as Q, who's one of the many Autobots who lands on Earth. He gets really injured by a shockwave, forcing him to be reformatted into an Einstein-looking Autobot. He participates in the events of Dark of the Moon before being captured by the Decepticons and gets killed by Barricade. Poor guy, he deserved better. Well, at least he's doing much better in the reboot. And to end this video, we have Wingblade. Not Wind Blade, Wingblade, who apparently is second only to Ironhide in the number of confirmed Decepticon kills. He's also one of the most powerful Autobots that are left on Cybertron. He's also huge. He was part of RC's raid team back on Cybertron, where they destroyed the Decepticon capital. After successfully destroying the capital, he supposedly made his way back to Earth alongside many of the other Autobots. However, that still remains unclear. I hope this guy's still alive because he's actually very cool in the comics. This guy is basically Ironhide if he could fly. And we did it, guys! BAM! Oh god. So I've been talking non-stop for an hour, so editing this is gonna be a pain for sure, but hopefully you guys enjoy this very long video. My next video is gonna be talking about all the 2007 Decepticons, and then we're gonna move on to Revenge of the Fallen, then Dark of the Moon, then Age of Extinction, and The Last Night. Luckily for me, as we go on, the number of characters that we see in extra, material start decreasing, so that's good. But the bad thing is that it's gonna be a while before we reach that point. So yeah, I'm tired. I'm gonna get a sip of water, and I'm gonna go mentally prepare myself for the horrible torture that's gonna be editing this video. I hope you guys are happy. Now donate to my Patreon and give me money. But in all seriousness, guys, thank you all for watching. This was fun to some degree. I learned a lot about characters that I didn't know existed in the Bayverse, like how Optimus Prime sent a whole bunch of creepy Autobots to stalk one human child. That's very interesting. That's something I didn't need to know, but okay. Let me know which one of these guys is your favorite, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh god, that's gonna be torture. Bye guys. Anyways guys, before we go, shout out to our amazing Patreons, TrueBlue712, Stitch Productions, Stephanie Ballard, Christopher Prime, Predicting Hunter Plays, Mario Gordon, Allspark Studios, Scrublord, and huge shout out to the absolute madman himself, Jordan the Great, who donated $100, and to our even big boss patron, XNooter23, who donated what I can only describe as a amount of money. I'll leave you guys to figure out how much. Thank you guys for your donation, it's very much appreciated by me and Squeaker, even though Squeaker is way too lazy to thank you. I tip my fedora in gratitude and put on my supreme gentleman hat in your honor. Link to our Patreon and the channels will be in the description down below for you guys to check out. Some of them do Transformers content, some of them do their own little thing, funny moments, their own animations. There's quite a diverse range of content here, so if you ever feel interested in checking other people out, check these guys. And if you guys want to shout out your subs, all you gotta do is donate to our Patreon. If you donate to our Patreon, you get quite a few rewards. You get a shout out in my videos, you can collab with me in some of my videos if you so choose to, request your own videos, exclusive roles in my Discord servers, there's plenty more coming. So yeah, it's a pretty good deal. But keep in mind that it's entirely optional because freedom is the right of all sentient beings. Anyways guys, thank you guys so much for donating, it's much appreciated. If you guys want to donate, you know what to do. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe guys.